One day a gang of bikers arrived at the club. It was a laboratory for preparing all sorts of illegal substances. The boss allowed Dalton to deliver a large batch of drugs, and at that moment the special forces broke into the club and arrested almost the whole gang. And at that time one was about to shoot, but Dalton stopped him. In fact, he was an agent hiding under the cover. At the same time, both the leader and his child managed to escape, sending a couple of special forces officers to another world in their escapade. Denny with his son left on the car, only Dalton rushed after them on a motorcycle. Having brought the car down, he managed to blow it up, as a result of which he laid Denny on the asphalt and arrested. The son intended not to lower his gun, so Dalton had to shoot in the leg, but the man didn't stop and reached out for another gun. After that, the cops shot him, and Denny promised Dalton that he would take revenge on him. This has upset the agent, and he left the post. 2 years had elapsed. In a school playground, a boy was bullying a girl, first blocking her way, then snatching her cap. When she protested, he pushed her. In an instant, Matty, ablaze with fury, shattered his nose in retaliation. The situation escalated as Phil Broker, a former agent turned Louisiana worker, was called in. The bully's mother, Casey, furiously confronted everyone, demanding action against Matty and Phil. The psychologist Susan advised Phil to stay calm, subtly referencing his wife's recent passing. Amidst the turmoil, Casey's husband attempted to confront Phil but was quickly overpowered. Casey, now infuriated, called for Phil's arrest. The sheriff, having witnessed the entire incident, remained impartial. During the journey, Casey scornfully mocked her husband, calling him a weakling who could easily be overpowered. Since there is such a weakling husband, Casey decided to grumble about the assailant to her brother Morgan, known as Alligator. Morgan Bodine encountered young addicts in a forsaken house, brutally attacking them with a bat, not for health advocacy but because they invaded his territory. Phil is proud that his daughter was able to stand up for herself. Matty insinuated to her father that he had a chance with Susan. Morgan met with his sister and asked her to cool things down, but Casey pleaded with him to at least intimidate Phil, as he usually does. Casey is so nervous because she's on drugs. She's constantly in withdrawal, and Morgan reluctantly gave her a dose and promised to deal with the assailant. Phil listened to his daughter and started communicating more with Susan. The woman hinted that he should resolve the recent conflict. They have medieval customs here, and blood feuds are common for the locals. Phil decided to heed the advice and approached Jimmy in the port to settle everything and avoid consequences. Jimmy demanded that Phil apologize to his wife and son. The former agent agreed. Phil was confident that everything was settled, but then at a gas station he was confronted by two thugs. One of them suggested going behind the building, but Phil started to fight right there. The second one didn't last long either and went down in a knockout along with his friend. Phil guessed that someone had sent these two after him, and he was right. Morgan was very surprised to learn that some worker had defeated two of his men. While Phil was driving his daughter home from school, they were stopped by the sheriff, who had heard about the incident at the gas station. The man tried to guess who Phil really was, a former cop, a federal agent, or military. Phil advised him not to mess with him, and his true identity remained a secret. Phil attracted not only the attention of the sheriff but also that of Morgan. Morgan tracked down Phil's family, slashed their car tire, then broke into their house and searched it thoroughly. Morgan found a file on his new enemy and picked one of the folders, where he learned that Phil was working undercover in a biker gang. Additionally, he grabbed Maddie's toy and her kitten. Maddie dedicated the entire day to finding her pet. In the evening, father promised to find it. Phil noticed the slashed tire, and a bit further, he found his daughter's toy's severed head. Morgan called his girlfriend Cheryl, who works as a waitress, and asked her to come over. They knew Denny and had heard about his son, who was shot by the special forces. The biker was still furious and dreamed of getting revenge on Phil. Only they knew where the former agent was located. They could exchange this information for the chance to distribute illegal substances across the state. Morgan instructed Cheryl to meet with Denny's lawyer and make a business proposal. Phil went to talk at Jimmy's again. He demanded that they leave him and his daughter alone and return their cat today. On Maddie's birthday, Phil gave her a new rabbit toy as a temporary stand-in until they found the original. Cheryl, standing by the car, waited for the lawyer and then asked him to deliver the documents found with Phil to Danny. The gang leader, ablaze with an intense yearning for revenge on the former agent, issued an order for his immediate elimination. Phil and Maddie apologized to Casey and her son, who was even invited to Maddie's birthday. Phil's partner Tito cautioned that reconciliation was rare in these parts, advising Phil to remain vigilant. Tito informed him about Alligator Morgan, who ostensibly repaired boats but actually operated a drug lab. Phil should be wary of him. A biker gang led by Cyrus Hanks, a known killer, was approaching town. Cheryl met Cyrus in a bar to discuss expanding their business with Morgan in exchange for the Phil identity. Cyrus, unconditionally demanding the necessary information, grabbed Cheryl by the throat. Meanwhile, Phil organized a grand party for his daughter, attended by numerous children including Casey's son. That evening Morgan warned his sister to steer clear of Phil, planning to confront him soon. Jimmy requested Morgan cease supplying drugs to his wife, whose condition was deteriorating. Phil's colleague investigated local criminals, paying particular attention to Cheryl, who had worked for Danny. The next morning Phil confronted Cheryl and Morgan in a diner, indicating he knew Morgan had broken into his house and advising them to leave him and his daughter alone. Phil then infiltrated alligator's territory, swiftly locating the drug lab. He filled light bulbs with fuel and doused by fuel the lab, intending to leave but found his kitten. A local held him at gunpoint, but Phil overpowered him. However, another assailant knocked Phil out with a metal bar. Two familiar faces from the gas station began beating and torturing Phil, threatening his daughter. Enraged, Phil overcame the bandits using only his legs, then using available tools to free himself. He overpowered the bandits and quickly returned home with the kitten. Morgan was stunned when Cyrus brought a host of killers. He instructed Morgan to reveal the location of the traitor, but the alligator refused, fearing police suspicion. Cyrus opted to take Cheryl with him. The gang proceeded to Phil's house by boat. Phil, with an arsenal under his bed, asked Tito in the barn to monitor the horses. Tito, in a fierce and grueling struggle, barely managed to overpower one formidable enemy, ultimately subduing him by stabbing with a pitchfork, a desperate move in a critical moment. Reaching his car, he signaled to alert Phil but was shot. Phil extinguished all lights in the house, instructing Maddie to hide in the basement and call emergency services. He armed himself with a shotgun, awaiting the intruders. One was killed as he entered the house, another by friendly fire, and a third, attempting to reach Maddie, also perished. Cheryl informed Morgan of the carnage at the house. During the shootout, Phil wounded Cyrus and followed his daughter into the woods, saving her from a pursuer. Phil killed him at the last moment, but Cyrus immediately attacked. Maddie ran to the river, pleading for Cheryl's help, who promised to save her. Phil seized Cyrus's knife and stabbed the criminal. He attempted to stop Cheryl, but she forcefully took Maddie in a boat and sped away. The sheriff and police arrived at Phil's house, followed by the injured Tito. Maddie used her mobile phone to inform her father of her kidnapper's whereabouts and the boat's location. Phil realized she was taken to Morgan's workshop and hurried to rescue her. Morgan, furious at Cheryl for bringing Maddie there, prepared to eliminate the witness. His sister, hearing a child was missing, arrived. Maddie's scream echoed from the garage. The woman attempted to assist, but Phil's trap ignited the fuel, blowing up the workshop with the equipment. Casey wanted to rescue the child, but Morgan planned to use her as a hostage. Their confrontation culminated in a gunshot. The criminal injured his sister and fled with Maddie in his car. Phil chased him in a police car. Police blockaded the road, forcing Morgan onto a bridge. Phil followed but crashed. Morgan, realizing his predicament, aimed to kill Phil, but Maddie intervened. Distracted, Morgan aimed his weapon at her. Yet Phil, utilizing his combat expertise masterfully, succeeded in neutralizing and overpowering the criminal. Having almost killed Morgan, Phil looked at Maddie and decided not to shoot. Cheryl was arrested, and Casey received medical attention. After these events, Phil visited Danny, declaring he would await his release eagerly. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.